Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Creating an Immigration Policy That Will Impress Talent. I want to give a big thanks to everyone who is here today. Before we get to the main presentation, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send you a link to download the recording after today's live session. We also encourage everyone listening in to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we will get to those questions once we get through the main portion of the slide deck. So if you would like to ask a question, please do so using the function that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. And as you're looking at your screen right now, you'll see an overview of today's presentation and some key areas this webinar will cover, including employment-based visa sponsorship options, green card sponsorship, and much more. For those that are unfamiliar with Envoy, for nearly 20 years, Envoy has been on a mission to fix the inefficient, frustrating, and confusing immigration process. We combine expert legal representation with innovative technology to deliver the only platform that makes it seamless for companies to hire, mobilize, and manage a global workforce. Envoy secures work authorization in 150 plus countries, has grown 46% year to date, and works with over 1,000 customers. We are particularly proud of our NPS score, which is a testament to the employee experience that we provide. And now introducing to today's presenter, Amanda Bullheit. Amanda is an associate at Global Immigration Associates, Amanda received her JD from the John Marshall Law School in 2014 after earning her BA in philosophy from Michigan State University. Amanda focuses on employment-based non-immigrant and immigrant petitions, in addition to advising companies on immigration and policy concerns. She is licensed to practice in Illinois and is a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Eric.
And with that, one more slide. At the end of today's presentation, you should walk away with an understanding of what components immigration policies you may want to include, how to approach immigration with regard to use as a recruitment or retention tool, and how an immigration policy can set expectations when hiring foreign nationals. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Amanda for the main presentation.
All right. Thank you very much, Eric. Hello, everyone. So, as Eric went over, today we're going to discuss creating an immigration policy that would impress talent in the workforce and fit within your company needs. So to start off, a global workforce is a key way to overcome talent gaps impacting organizations. As the skills gap continues to impact certain organizations, more companies are increasingly turning toward global recruiting as part of their talent acquisition strategy. Standardizing company immigration policies does help set expectations up front and create proper procedures for recruiting foreign nationals. Whether a company has current immigration policies in place or if new policies need to be implemented, it is a good idea for a company to look at their company as a whole and determine what policies may be needed to standardize their immigration practices so that new and current employees are aware of next steps with their status. Although each employee's case will be specific, policies such as when to start the green card process or who will bear the burden of the costs, whether it be the employee or the employer, are good places to start with and set up expectations. All right, first we're going to be discussing employment-based non-immigration visa sponsorship options. Apologies. When crafting an immigration policy, it's important to decide what visa types your company wants to sponsor. As you can see, there's a variety of work visa types available, so it's really just up to your company to kind of go over those with your employment counsel and determine which would be best fit to your typical company needs. A company may sponsor for whichever visa they choose, as long as the position and the sponsored candidate qualify for the parameters of that visa. So when creating an immigration policy, a company should look at the immediate needs and their workforce to determine which visas they will likely utilize most. However, it is also important to keep an open mind is some candidates may qualify for a visa type that's a little less common to the company. For example, for companies with entities abroad, it's likely that the L1 visa may be utilized fairly frequently. However, if a qualified candidate is approached who would also qualify for a TN, it may be necessary to utilize that category as the best fit. Therefore, your company should work with their immigration counsel to determine if any candidates may be eligible for certain visa types, as immigration counsel can advise on what types of temporary work visas may be applicable. Other issues to address with regard to the non-immigrant visas would be that a company can include with their policies would be, one, who would bear the cost of premium processing case if it's available for a specific case type, whether that would be taken on by the company or whether it would need to be taken on by the employee. And also, when would the foreign national employee begin working? For certain instances and case types, employees can start working upon the receipt notice, the receipt of their case. So if that's an option, does the company want them to be able to work immediately, or does the company just want to wait until the case is approved? Things like these can be discussed with the company's immigration provider to help determine practices that best fit the company's needs. The next thing we'll be discussing are the immigration policies for green card sponsorship. So another thing to consider when crafting or modifying an immigration policy is whether the company will sponsor an employee for a green card. Green card sponsorship isn't required by a company, but it is something that we've seen become more and more frequent within the company's immigration policies. Companies are using green card sponsorship not only as a tool for retaining employees within their organization, but also as a recruitment tool as more potential candidates look for companies who would offer green card sponsorship as a perk. The benefits of offering green card sponsorship and laying out a clear policy include the employees knowing up front whether or not they would be considered for sponsorship, so there's no miscommunication right off the bat. This would also improve the communication of the company's expectations of a foreign national employee prior to the investment of the green card. So this would include kind of the timeline and expectations that all parties to the contract would be held accountable for, and it would ensure consistency with the company's practices. Lastly, a set policy would also help the company budget and plan for future immigration-related costs. For example, a set plan would hopefully help catch any surprise issues with employees approaching maxed out dates that would need green card sponsorship in order to continue working in the U.S. If there's a set plan in place, this would hopefully catch any of those. Obviously, there are always, outside scenarios where they might creep up, but hopefully this would be a preemptive measure. And additionally, a plan could help address with any issues such as, the payment issues, who will be paying for dependent cases or premium processing if available. It's important to note that there really is no set route that a company needs to take with regard to green card sponsorship. Typical options for sponsorship is either to open the green card case immediately upon hire, or perhaps after a few months of working, or even after a year of good performance and work within the company. It really is up to the company's discretion as how they wish to craft their immigration policy and what works best with their current employees and their future recruitment needs. When creating an immigration policy, the company should also consider developing payment and reimbursement guidelines. It's important to have a clear policy and agreement in place with regard to payment and reimbursement for the costs of the visa and/or green card sponsorship. There are certain portions of the green card process that the employer has to pay for. For example, in the perm green card process, the employer must cover all costs associated with the perm portion of the green card. So that would include the prevailing wage determination, all recruitment that's run, and costs associated with the Form ETA 9089. These are costs that cannot be delegated to the employee. The costs associated with the I-140 immigrant petition and I-485 adjustment of status applications may be offset by the employee. So additionally, the employee may pay for any costs associated with their dependent cases for the green card. In most instances, for the green card and other non-immigrant visas, the cost of premium processing may be covered by the employee, but it is case specific, so it is best to consult with your immigration counsel if there are any questions as to what costs an employee may or may not cover. For purposes of an immigration policy, companies may choose to cover all costs. They may choose to cover costs only for the primary with regard to the H1 with regard to the green card, and then the primary would have to cover their dependent costs, or the employer may decide they only want to cover what's legally required for them to cover, and then the employee would cover the rest. It really just is based on your specific company's needs and how you want to proceed with that. Additionally, some costs are allowed to be recovered due to liquidated damages clauses in contract agreements. For example, certain costs for H-1B non-immigrant applications, I-140 or I-485 applications can be included. These contract clauses would be governed by the state-specific laws, so if a company would like to include any such clauses in their contracts, we would recommend that they speak with their corporate counsel regarding what steps to take. Immigration policies don't only need to focus on green cards and non-immigrant visas. They can also include other immigration perks. Aside from the green card and non-immigrant visas, the company may also offer additional perk packages as immigration benefits. This is also part of the recruitment and retention tool, as these benefits do help attract new employees and they alleviate some of the stress of immigration for their company's current workers. For example, some employers choose to offer a per diem for transportation, living expenses, if their employee has to travel and obtain visa stamping, and as previously mentioned, for green card sponsorship. Again, adding any of these options to the immigration policy would be up to the company's discretion and the specific needs for the company's immigration population. And as you've heard kind of throughout the presentation, immigration policies can be used both as a recruitment and an employee retention tool. Green card sponsorship is valuable for current employees as a way to retain them within the company. Non-immigrant work visas are temporary in nature, and some non-immigrant visa types do have a maximum amount of stay allotted for the employee to remain and work in the U.S. Therefore, if the employer would wish to continue employment, a green card would be necessary to keep that employee inside the U.S. and working. So when creating or revising a company immigration policy, it is important to address all potential factors within the company. The company should take on a holistic approach as to what they need and where they think the company is moving, in addition to figuring out costs associated with immigration sponsorship, who will pay for what, when the sponsorship will start, and what effect it may have on the current immigration population, as well as the future immigration population. It is also important to work with the company's corporate counsel to determine what policies fit within the standard company guidelines. In addition to retention, offering green card sponsorship is also a valuable asset to attract new global talent. Immigration policies and sponsorship can be used as a benefit and are highly attractive to the global workforce when looking for new employment. It's a way to help employers compete for top talent and also to help fill in any gaps in recruiting for the skilled positions, as many individuals of the global workforce do actively look to pursue green card sponsorship with a new employer.
Great, and as the presentation almost comes to a close, I just want to discuss the importance of also when crafting that immigration policy, partnering with an immigration services provider. When it comes to creating this policy, who are you going to be working with on these immigration matters? They're important because, as we see today, technology is becoming a much more important aspect of immigration when it comes to uploading documents, sharing those documents between a company and the associated attorneys. So ask yourself, if you're looking for an immigration services provider, what technology do they use? To take into strong consideration security. Obviously you want to make sure those documents are protected. Communications. Is there a communications hub where if you're considering green card sponsorship, you can quickly ask your attorney, a question, and you don't get boggled down in long email chains or things like that. So if when creating an immigration policy, if needed, go to an RFP with multiple immigration service providers to learn more about the services that are offered and the technology that they use. So with that, Amanda, thank you so much for the presentation. There's a lot of good information. Now we have quite a few minutes for question and answer, so I want to turn it over to our audience and encourage everyone to start submitting some questions. So I have a couple questions coming in, and the first one I want to touch on is the trends report. Does the trends report have data on when employers are sponsoring green cards or other visa types? Answer to that is yes. We do go into those statistics, and you can find the trends report on our Envoy Global website, or you can reach out to us after this webinar, and we can send you a copy of that. And I also want to plug our 2019 trends report, which will be coming out early next year. All right, so got some other questions. Let me pull them up. All right, so Amanda, of the costs associated with green card application process, what costs do you see common that are passed on to the employee, if any? So many of them are regulated that they must be supported by the company as a condition of work authorization.
Right. So it really, again, it really just does depend on the company and their employees. A lot of the costs that I see transferred over to the employee in the green card process would be pretty much at that I-485 stage, the actual green card application. So a lot of times the employee does pay for that, in addition to all of the dependent cases. So probably the two most common would be the employer will take care of all of the costs of the perm as they're mandated, the perm green card, and then they'll take over the I-140 costs, and then they might take over that I-485 for the primary beneficiary, their employee, so his green card case or her green card case. But then with any of the dependents for that I-485, the employees would be handling those costs. That's probably one of the most common we see. Another common one would be the employer takes all the costs up through the I-140, and then the employee is just delegated to handle the costs associated with all of the green card applications. But yeah, it really just depends from company to company, what you're comfortable with, what your employees are looking for, and what works best.
Gotcha. Kind of sticking with the green card, earlier in the presentation, we laid out a couple of the sponsorship options, so like immediately, 3 months, and et cetera. So the question is, are there any other green card sponsorship options other than those that we highlighted?
Yes, so those are kind of, again, just the general sponsorship options that we see. Some companies choose to sponsor immediately, some choose to sponsor after 6 months or a year. But again, it really just is up to the company and the policies that they want to implement. If they want to sponsor green cards on an as-needed basis, if the person's approaching a max-out issue, and that's the only time they're going to implement it, then that would be something the company would need to be considered. Usually the trend we're seeing is maybe after 6 months or a year, employees and employers being a little bit more proactive with the green card sponsorship, but that's just really something that the company needs to decide what works best for them.
Great. Just give us a second. I'm just looking at more questions. Is there any specific language a company can use so they aren't tied into a specific timeline for sponsorship?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a company in their policy can either state after 6 months, that's when we're going to sponsor. After a year, that's when we're going to sponsor. If the company doesn't want to be tied down to any specific timeline, they can always just use language or kind of a policy guideline that maybe after 6 months is when they'll consider sponsorship for the employee, or after a year is when they're considering sponsorship, so they're not quite as tied down, and the employees aren't looking at 6 months and saying, well, at 6 months you have to start sponsorship now. So that's something that can definitely be worked around.
Gotcha. Thank you. So Amanda, with the current climate of heightened focus on RFIs and delays, do you see companies participating at the same level for green cards that require perm?
Sure. So I don't specifically have any hardcore data on this, but just with the clients that I handle and what I'm seeing, I haven't really seen a decrease in perm green card sponsorship. Unfortunately, with the current immigration climate, obviously we are receiving RFEs for all of the non-immigrant visas. So that I am seeing affecting a little bit just for non-immigrant sponsorship. But with regard to the green cards, we still have, at this point, even though it may take a little bit longer due to RFIs and perm audits and heightened scrutiny, we do still see the green card progression. So I typically warn employers now that when we do start a green card sponsorship, typically might take 1.5 years to 2 years. If there are audits or if there's an RFI or anything like that, it will delay the process. So at least we kind of have everything laid out right at the front with the typical processing times. But I'm still seeing employers wishing to sponsor their employees for green cards.
Okay. Going back to the start of the presentation, when it comes to the visa sponsorship options, is it possible to be flexible when deciding which visa to sponsor for? So let's say the question is, let's say the company 1 year is just sponsoring H-1Bs and Ls, and then the next year wants to sponsor. Can they also sponsor a TN like the following year?
Mm-hmm.
Can they be flexible when doing that?
Yeah, the company can definitely be flexible. Usually, like if the company does have foreign entities and they are used to pursuing more L visas and maybe even EB1s or that route with regard to green cards, they can still choose to sponsor for other non-immigrant visa and green card options. We do get questions a lot with companies who do sponsor a lot of one type and they have a candidate that they wish to hire but might not fit within the qualifications of the type of visa that they're used to hiring. So then that's when they come to us and they ask us what other options may be available. The company isn't limited just to a certain non-immigrant visa type because that's what they've designated their policy. They'll still be open to all.
Great. All right. So thank you. All right. Amanda, what is the reality of having USCIS / the Department of Labor presenting at the workplace to review immigration records for foreign nationals? Have you noticed an increase during the current climate?
Sure. So I believe this is referring to site visits from USCIS officers and just retention of records. We have seen an increase in site visits given the current immigration climate, which sounds scary. But in reality, what it is, they just want to make sure that the employees and the employer are all abiding by the correct practices. If an employee is supposed to be working at a location and a USCIS officer comes to check and conduct a site visit at that location, they want to make sure that they are working in the correct place, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing is what was presented. So that's something to keep in mind to remain compliant with all of the immigration records and needs. If an employee is moving, changing locations, there's a title change or a job change, always run it past your immigration provider. That way they can advise whether or not an amendment may need to be filed, if a new green card process needs to be started, just to make sure that the company is remaining in compliance.
Great. All right. So we've been talking a lot about immigration policy, and it leads to this a good question. Does an immigration policy need to be an official written policy, or can it be a general guideline that human resources follows?
Sure. So it doesn't need to be an official written policy. For some of the larger companies, maybe with a larger, immigration workforce, a written policy is beneficial because then current employees have something to look at and have something to refer to with regard to green card sponsorship and their non-immigrant visa. And current employees, new employees also have that information to go to when they're hired. The employer can hand off the information directly to them and hopefully kind of alleviate any questions. But for smaller companies who may not have a set policy in place yet and are kind of thinking of one, it could also be just a general guideline that is set for HR. So if they have just one or two foreign national employees, the HR can kind of go through the guideline if they see fit. They might have the opportunity to do a little bit more one-on-one with just the two employees or the small amount of employees, so then it doesn't really need to be written down.
Gotcha. Thank you. And we are getting a few questions on this slide deck. You will be able to download the slide deck. It'll be sent out via email along with the recording, so please keep an eye out on your inbox for that coming message. So another question that just came in, looks like it's a two-parter, maybe it's misreading. So have you seen any immigration policies that have fast-tracked sponsorship for those petitions that are harder to fill, especially given the current environment with H-1B RFEs, lack of premium processing, and etc.?
Sure. So I do see occasionally some employees' green cards be fast-tracked for various reasons. So maybe the employer just wants to move forward with their green card process quickly. Usually what I see is if they are approaching a max out issue. So if a person is hired, for example, on H-1B, but their max out is in a year and they need an approved I-140, they need to get to the certain part in the green card process, the employer upon hire might wish to modify their current policies. Say they would usually wait 6 months, but in this case that would be too long. So they might modify their policies and say, okay, in this case, we will start the green card process and we want to fast track it. We want to do everything that we can, pay for premium processing. We want to run, the prevailing wage and recruitment concurrently. So that is definitely an option. Usually it is on a case-by-case basis. And when I take on a green card case from the onset, I'll review for any of those potential red flags where we might need to fast track it and reach out to the company to let them know so that they can determine how they best want to proceed. But that is something that I have seen in instances even more frequently with the current immigration climate. Employers are trying to get through this process quickly. So that's something to take into consideration as well when creating an immigration policy with, we can have general standards, but then also in certain instances, do you want to fast track the process?
Gotcha. So I think we're gonna end it there. We had a ton of great questions. If we didn't get to your question, please reach out again, and we'll hopefully get to it then. As a reminder, this webinar will be sent out, and you'll be able to download it for viewing at a later time, and you'll also be able to view the slide deck. Additionally, please join us next Tuesday, December 18th, for our final webinar of 2018, the state of immigration, and we're also going to be taking a look ahead to 2019. So if you have any questions surrounding that, please join us, and hopefully you'll find that interesting. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you everyone who is joined us as well.